Today, it seems like Virginia, we're getting a little more high-tech businesses.
You're far better off buying a smaller business that exists.
I find that a lot of sellers initially say, hey, I want to sell the business. Later down the road, they wish like, oh, I wish I would have stuck around a little more.
The buyers are like, well, what happens when you walk out the door? Hi, this is Rick Chess. We're here today with Todd Ferby, one of the premier business brokers in the Virginia, really in the Mid-Atlantic. Background in manufacturing, background in engineering. We're going to get into a lot of detail with Todd today. Well, Todd, welcome. I'm glad you're here today.
Thank you very much, Rick.
So talk about, for so many folks out there that have been a W-2 all their life, when you're out there starting your own manufacturing company, what's that feeling when you're like, damn, I'm responsible for everything. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, right. It can be a little overwhelming, right? So, you got the whole process there, which can be overwhelming, but it's also fun too. You're in control, and you're making sure you're making a quality product, and everything from sourcing, raw materials, and dealing with vendors, and having quality employees, and shipping to the right place and at the right time. A lot goes into obviously a manufacturing process.
Was the business already existing and then you bought it, or was this a de novo where you started from scratch?
It was existing business. Yes, it was started, 18 years before I bought it.
Well, let's take a step back. Why did this existing business appeal to you? What was it about that it kind of like, in your mind, in your heart said, yeah, this would be a good place for me?
Yeah, so I was looking for a manufacturing company. Like I said, I wanted to make my own products, and this company was somewhat technical product, filtration, liquid filtration, and then it was local. It was close to where I live, so that was important. It was the right size. It was small enough that I could afford to buy it, and had a lot of potential, I thought, to grow it. So
when you bought it, did you go out and leverage it to the hilt? Did you mostly friends and family? How did you finance buying the property, buying the business?
yeah, so I had sold another company, so I had some cash and also used financing to acquire it. Growth, required some capital, but I didn't take much debt on, and I paid off my loan fairly quickly, and I kept reinvesting in the company as we grew.
I was in the Marine Corps, and I've attended programs done at William and Mary that are designed for veterans doing entrepreneurial work. And it's tough enough going from the military into the private sector. When you go from being in the Army to the Marine Corps, at least you know how to salute. You know some of the basic rules. It's really tough going anybody into pure entrepreneurial. And so, when I am asked the question, particularly with veterans, I'm saying, look, you're far better off buying a smaller business that exists, but you've been involved with everything. You've been involved from de novo. You've been involved with taking over business. When does one make more sense than the other? Starting from scratch or buying an existing business?
It's much easier to buy an existing business because you already have customers, vendors, employees. Much easier. So, and it's less risky also. So, starting from scratch, probably, I don't know what the percentages are, but I'm sure there's a lot more failures in those than there are in buying an existing business. And unless you have like a great idea that nobody else has and you want to start your own business, I mean, that would be the way to go. But normally, if you want to get in business, the easiest transition is to buy an existing business.
I know that your business was located up in the Hanover Airport. I'm just thinking of how you might help them. What kind of businesses are up there?
So that's another thing that was kind of nice about buying Delta Pure. They were located in Hanover County, which is somewhat of a tax friendly for manufacturers. They reduce, your annual property tax you pay, like on your machine and equipment. So they're friendly to manufacturing, and it's very diversified, base in Hanover. And so I was very happy with finding that Delta Pure was located in Hanover, and they were a business-friendly county. And another thing, I guess, was somewhat of a positive. There's a kind of a workforce, and some of their schools have programs to kind of develop people that would potentially go into manufacturing. Overall, it's a good county for manufacturing.
I go way back to the 70s, and I think about tobacco and how it drove Richmond. And it's still relevant, but is no longer the dominant, manufacturing. I'm from Pittsburgh. When I grew up, it was steel or steel fabricating. We lost all of our mills. We had to start over again. As you've moved from being a manufacturer yourself into business brokerage, you're thinking about the metro Richmond area in which we both live. What are the dominant manufacturers or industrial uses? I mean, what do you see unique about this area?
Yeah. So when I started out, I was covering Virginia with industrial, covering manufacturing. Like you mentioned, tobacco was big, paper mills were big, not as big anymore. Obviously, power companies, which they haven't gone away, they've evolved. Today, it seems like Virginia, we're getting a little more high tech businesses. Pharmaceutical companies have grown and chemical, processing companies. DuPont was always been a big employer in Richmond. Allied Signal. Hopewell's always been a big concentration of chemical plants. We're not getting many new businesses like that, but we're getting data centers now. I think we have Eli Lilly is going to be locating to Goochland. That's kind of shifting towards a little more technology type companies.
What's something that's a boring metric that you think manufacturer CEOs that they really should be looking at this and maybe they're not?
I mean, I had an engagement with a company that was owned by a trust and they were run by a reluctant leader. And one of the things I set up like key process indicators, KPIs for them to focus on because they weren't really measuring anything. So the number one thing is to make sure you do identify whatever business you're in, your key performance indicators, monitor those, measure them, set goals. The number one in manufacturing, I think, is like your gross profit margin. I mean, that's kind of a key factor that kind of affects everything else.
But let's say you come in there and you're a couple years before they're ready to, maybe they're ready to pull the trigger, but you got a couple years to work with to get their business in shape. Where do you focus their energy?
Yeah, so a couple areas. I mean, clean financials. If their financials aren't run really great, or they don't have a great accountant, make sure they get clean financials. You got to have that. And then company reliance on the owner. So try to delegate more of those things to other people within the company and let other people handle more of the management of the business. So the less kind of owner reliance the company has, the more appealing it becomes to buyers. So.
I mean, you're hitting on, I mean, when doing the veterinarian clinics with Gary Ackerman, Dr. Gary Ackerman, we're selling this business for the veterinarian, but the veterinarian has always been so prideful of controlling everything. The buyers are like, well, what happens when you walk out the door? I'm dealing with a neighbor dentist friend, and he's just so excited about selling. And I'm like, trying to get him to slow down, to kind of look at what does this really mean?
One of the areas in which is always an important area you should discuss with sellers what they're going to do after they sell the business. Especially if they've been involved with the business for a long time, that's kind of their life. I find that a lot of sellers initially say, hey, I want to sell the business and I only want to stick around for 3 months or 6 months or the minimum amount. Later down the road, they wish like, oh, I wish I would have stuck around a little more and worked part-time for them. And actually what happens, some owners will come back after they've left and talk to the new owners and will, come back to work for them actually on a part-time basis or something. So